Let's take a look at a diagram to get a sense of what we think our users table might look like once it's working. You can see here that we've got a users table. It's a plural, that's the convention used by Rails. And there are three columns. There's ID, name, and email address. So the ID is just a unique way of identifying each user, in this case just an integer. And then there's the name and the email address, which we'll also be using as the username. So this table corresponds to the following users model. This is also the users table, but in this case, I'm just representing it in a slightly different way. These are the three columns, ID, name, and email, which in this case we're really thinking of as attributes on an object. And then here are the types. There's an integer type for the ID, and then the name and email are both strings. Now let's translate this diagram into code. Do that with a migration. You may recall that we generated a user's controller like this, and we gave it an action name because we wanted a new page. In this case, instead of putting the action, we'll actually put the attributes, but I'll put that in just a second. So we've got a user model. This is the convention in Rails to use a singular. And so instead of Rails generate controller users, we have Rails generate model user. And then we can put the attributes on the command line, and the name will be a string. You can see we can give it the type as well. And the email address, which we'll just call email, is also a string. So this will generate a file for us called a migration that will let us update our database. You can see the migration file name here includes a timestamp. This will differ on your system because presumably you're making this at a different time. In fact, I can pretty much prove it. But the name here is the same on all systems. The reason for this timestamp is essentially so that people on different systems, like different collaborators, can create migrations and have them not conflict. Like in older versions of Rails, this used to be sequentially numbered, like 1, 2, 3, and that would cause conflicts if people made migrations on two different systems and then tried to merge them. So this is just a way of avoiding clashes. So let's take a look at it. It's in, well, actually, let's just collapse these guys. Look at, it's what you can see here. db migrate is the folder. So db migrate, and there it is. If it's not there, you should go up to here and go to refresh file tree. And here it is. This is not important to understand in detail. This is just something generated by Rails. The thing to focus on is this section in here, this t.string name, t.string email. So as you can probably guess, this is the type, and these are the attributes. T here is a variable that is passed to a block. You can see that create tables users do. This is a symbol. This is a block. This T just stands for table. So this is a table object, and it's not important to know how it works. I don't know how it works. This is just something that we can use inside this block here to create new attributes on the table. In this case, name and email. And then you can see this line here, t.timestamps and then null false. This is just a way of telling the database that these things should not be empty. They should not be null, which is the database way of saying nil, essentially. And we'll see in a moment what t.timestamps gives us. In fact, let's take a look at the diagram right now. So this is our sketch, what we thought this user's data model might look like, but here's what it actually looks like. So here we've got the ID, name and email, which we expected, but then it also has these two columns, created at and updated at. These are the columns created by this. This line, t.timestamps, automatically creates these columns. We do not ever have to manipulate these columns, at least not in a regular application. We'll see later on in this tutorial we actually will manipulate, I think, the created at in the context of a test. But these are automatically updated by Rails. They're usually called magic columns. And that's because they just get updated automatically. When you create a new user, it stamps the date time here. And then if you change that user record, then it changes updated at. By the way, you might also have noticed that here we did not include the ID among the attributes, and that's because Rails includes it automatically. We can update our database with the information in this diagram that was created by this migration, or this migration file rather, by actually running the migration. Do bundle exec, we use rake, and then it's rake db migrate, the colon there. We saw this before in lesson 2, but now we're actually digging into it to try to understand what's going on. All right, let's take a look at what that did. We can actually look at the schema for the system. Actually, where is that? It's in sample app db schema, so it's in here, db. It's weird, so it's not appearing. That's why I was confused. Refresh it. There it is. This is a file that actually has the data model. This is just a recapitulation here of the migration, essentially, except it's got a little bit more explicit information. So t.string, you can also see a tiny difference. This is a string instead of a symbol, but you shouldn't worry about those things. So this file contains the most up-to-date version of the data model. Let me show you how to reverse this thing if you want to. If for any reason you want to undo one of these migrations, if you did something wrong, for example, in terms of your data modeling, you can do a bundle exec rake db rollback. You can see here that the schema.rb file updated. So let's rerun that migration though. We actually want to do it. All right, you might be wondering, what exactly is this doing? I mean, so this is updating the schema file, but somewhere information must be persisted, right? We must be storing data somewhere in some database. And the answer is that in development, we're using a database called SQLite. So this is, in fact, an SQLite file. So if I just double-clicked on it, you can see that it's not very helpful just looking at it as a plain text file. The only thing that's really readable is this thing at the top, SQLite format 3. But we can actually take a look at this by downloading it to the local machine. I'm going to right-click on it. You can also control-click. And see, I'm going to download it. And you can see development paren1 here. So development is the name of the database. It's development.sqlite3 because it's our development database. And this 1 indicates that I've already downloaded it once into this directory. But that's okay. It's just there to disambiguate it from the previous download. I can save it here. And let me go to a local terminal window. And now I'm just going to make a directory for the databases for the sample app. And let me cd there. And I'm going to move that development database from the downloads to here. Let's escape these out. There we go. And let me just call it development. There we go. So I just want to take a look at that. Let's open it up. On OS 10, this open command will open this with whatever the program is associated with this. So let's open it like this. And you can see this is the database browser, the SQLite database browser. You can find a download page for this in the Rails tutorial book, or you can just Google it. And if you look at this, you can see, in fact, that we've got all the structure that we put into this, this model. If we look over here, you can see ID, name, email, created at, updated at. This is an actual database now, though. This is looking at the local SQLite database. SQLite is actually a production-ready database for things like embedded applications, but you wouldn't ordinarily use it for a web application. And in fact, we'll be using PostgreSQL in production. If you're looking for a very challenging exercise, you can try installing PostgreSQL on your local machine. There's a footnote in the book giving you some direction on how to do that. But it's so much easier just to deal with these SQLite databases that we'll be using them in this tutorial. So an SQLite database, in fact, is just a file. There's no extra structure. It just lives in a single file. And you can see here that it's got all of the attributes that we wanted. By the way, in case you don't know how to associate a program with a particular kind of file, let me show you. This is actually pretty tricky. This is really quick. I'm going to do open dot to open up the current directory using the Finder, which is the default application for directories. So if you right-click on this and go to, let's see, it's get info, and then you change this. You go to open with, and you choose whatever you want, and then you click on change all. So that associates SQLite browser, in this case, with the file name extension SQLite3. That first step of clicking on get info seems quite counterintuitive to me, so I mentioned it for completeness.